All right, well, today I'm here with Richard and with Ron, and we are at the Strasburg Railroad, a little bit before much activity is happening. And these gentlemen have been kind enough to sit down and talk to me a little bit about their flyer experiences. And Richard, I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit, how did you get into American Flyer?
Well, Boston in 1949, Christmas, my dad gave me a K-12 Pacific with rolling stock, American Flyer. He went that way rather than Lionel, and I've been with American Flyer ever since.
Yeah. Wow. And do you still have some of your first equipment?
I do have some of the first stuff, and I have the modern stuff now made by Lionel, and I like that too.
Okay.
You know?
Okay. So do you operate both on your layout, both the traditional?
Yes, I do.
AC
I have the 1950s Flyer and the modern stuff on the same layout. I have two ovals, and one's 054, the other one's 042, and I run both freight and passenger.
Okay.
And diesel and steam.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. And Ron, how about yourself? How did you find yourself involved with Flyer?
It's a long story. Here we go. I have relatives on both sides of my family that worked at AC Gilbert's. I live about 5 miles from the factory to this day. About 2 miles from where AC Gilbert lived in North Haven and Hamden, Connecticut. My brother, who was 6 years older than me, had both Lionel and American Flyer. And as kids, we used to play with both of them and drag race both of them, and just had a lot of fun with them. And always loved the choo-choo unit and the smoke output from American Flyer. To this day, you can't replace that original choo-choo unit. You can walk into a train show crowded with people, crowded with operating layouts, and you will still hear that distinctive choo-choo sound coming, and you know there's a Flyer engine running someplace.
Yeah.
And it's gotten very near and dear to my heart over the years. I originally started out with HO, and then went to O gauge. And the last 15 or 20 years since I've been a member of the TCA, I guess there's a lot of civic pride in me. I started collecting American Flyer accessories, transformers. I've got nearly every B-type transformer that they made. A couple rare variations also. So I always try to look for that, bring stuff home to where it came from.
Yeah. Okay. So Ron, you've talked a little bit with me, and you mentioned here that you live close to the AC Gilbert American Flyer factory, and you've had some personal experience working there. Tell us a little bit about that.
And I say to my mother, I'm going to AC Gilbert's. Okay. It was only about a 5 or 6 minute walk. And walked into the factory showroom or store, and was doing this for about a month or so. Finally, the lady, I'll never forget her. She was a lovely, lovely person. Her name was Wilma Reese. Rest in peace, Wilma. Ron, do you want a job? Well, yeah, sure. Come in here every afternoon. Just tidy up all the display pieces. They had a lot of stuff, a lot of junk, to be honest with you, at that point. This was 63, 64, and they were already into the virtually all plastic stuff. But then after a while, they started cleaning out the archives, and I got a lot of stuff out of there. Stuff that they bought from competitors. A lot of British HO track, and I got a lot of pre-war HO track that had the Bakelite bed in it and the blue steel rails. That was a gorgeous track. It's a pity they couldn't keep making it. So I would go in there and work for about an hour and a half every afternoon, 5 days a week, and she paid me in merchandise.
Nice.
And stuff. So it was a good experience.
Yeah.
My mom worked there several times throughout her life. Once, I was about a 10-year-old kid, they had what they called the homework department, And she would take her wagon, go to the factory, and they would give her boxes of those bent nail puzzles, and she would take them home and assemble them and take them back, and she would get paid. Then she went back in her 20s. She had a job at that point cutting wires certain length and stripping about a ½ inch off each end of the insulation. And the factory was not only run by AC Gilbert or Alfred Carlton. He had a brother, Frank W., and he would come around, and my mother said he was the most personable person you could ever hope to meet. He would stop and talk to you and see how you were doing. On the other hand, if AC came around, you kept your nose down to the grindstone and you'd need to look at him. And then she went back in the early 60s, very late 50s, early 60s, and the first job she had was putting those bent nail puzzles together, and she boom, 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 boom. So the foreman comes over to her. Did you do this before? Oh yeah, about 40 years ago when I was a kid. He says, I thought so. And then they put her on something else, and they asked her to take her diamond ring off, and she said no. And they had a machine that was this is when blister packing was just starting, and it was these puzzles, and they would lay a huge sheet of cardboard and put the puzzles down, and it would go into a machine. It would be laminated with the plastic, and then you'd have to put it through another machine to cut them into selling units. And my mother refused to take her rings off, and they had taken the safety guard off the machine. Yeah. And she says, no, well, we're gonna have to let you go. Fine, let me go. So she quit then, and everybody came up to her and said, Mary, that was a smart move. Somebody lost a finger last week because of that. So that was the end of her career at AC Gilbert. I also have a cousin who was a tool and die maker. He did his apprenticeship at AC Gilbert's. He made the dies for the Pike Master track. Sorry to say, fellow collectors, that stuff is very sad. And he also worked on the dies for the Autorama car racing set. So then I had an aunt on my father's side who worked in the paint department. And my brother's first mother-in-law worked in the paint department. And so I have family members from all over the place. All of them are now gone, sadly, but they worked at AC Gilbert's.
You mentioned that AC Gilbert was very intent on business and production and economics, keeping people on task and figuring out problems and all that, which on one hand is pretty harsh, but there was another side to him. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
AC, his primary residence was on Ridge Road in North Haven, Connecticut, which is maybe 4 miles north of the factory. But he had a hunting preserve in the town of Hamden, which is where I live, and it was known as Paradise. And if anybody's interested, pick up the book, The Man Who Lived in Paradise. It's a fascinating history on a really great American industrialist. He had his own dairy farm, so when you look at the Gilbert Dairy car on your line, it really existed. And he supplied fresh milk free of charge to all the employees that ate in the cafeteria at the factory, which was, it was very remarkable in that time, because nobody gave you anything for free. This was when unions were first struggling to come into existence. He not only did that for his employees, he also provided free health insurance, had nurses and doctors on hand just in case anybody got sick. He really cared for his employees, but he also expected his employees to give their very best, and virtually all of them did.
Oh, excellent. Is there anything else that would be good for those of us not from New Haven to know about about New Haven, or about? I know you're a bit of a history
Yes.
guy. You talked about how New Haven or Connecticut is the only state that's hosted all the American rail electric train manufacturers.
Right. It started with Ives Manufacturing in Bridgeport, Connecticut. They started in the late 1800s. Always were in Bridgeport.
Okay.
Lionel, at one point, before they built their factory in New Jersey, moved production from Manhattan, New York, to New Haven for about 2 years, and then their plant in New Jersey was ready, and they left New Haven. And then, of course, AC Gilbert buying the American Flyer Manufacturing Company from Chicago and transporting it to New Haven, where it stayed for about 25, 30 years. It was at one time the largest toy factory in the world. At their peak, they employed over 4,000 people.
Oh, wow.
It was enormous. They took up, the buildings are still there, and I've sent you pictures
Yeah.
of the buildings.
Which, that was in the video,
I'm also going to dig through the archives in the house when they announced that the factory was going out of business, closing down. I think that was 1967. I went down there. I was an avid young photographer. I went down there and I took black and white pictures
Okay.
of the building.
Okay.
And above the main entrance, they had about foot-tall stainless steel letters, the AC Gilbert Company.
Nice.
Hopefully I have a photograph of that, and if I do, I'll
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
send you a picture of that.
Yeah.
There was also at one time an erector tower at the south end of the factory, very close to the New Haven Railroad line that went right by the factory. And that housed a radio broadcasting tower. And one of AC's interests was also radio. And he had one of the first licensed radio stations in the state of Connecticut, if not the country.
Wow.
Not the very first, but close to the very first. He was a man of many, many interests.
And the factory, I mean, we're talking specifically about electric trains, but the factory did what else? They produced director.
They
talked
produced
about
director
puzzles.
sets, chemistry sets, telescopes, microscopes. They made household appliances. They made vacuum cleaners, hair dryers.
Fans, right?
They made fans, desk fans, window fans. Butter churns, electric butter churns. My grandmother had one of those. And she used to buy non-homogenized milk and skim the cream off the top and make butter. She thought she was saving money. Whether she was or not, I don't know. But they had enough to keep them going all year long. I don't ever recall massive layoffs because the toy season was over. Of course, they would start production on toys the end of February, beginning of March, after the toy show in New York. They would start ramping up production on that stuff. But like from October until February, that was when they'd start making the appliances, the fans, and everything else, things that would sell all year long.
Well, Ron, thank you very much. This has been
My pleasure.
amazing.
Great.
I'm sure there are many that will see this and appreciate what you shared with us. Thank you very much.
I hope so. My pleasure.
Yeah. Richard?
Yes,
Thank
it's a
you,
pleasure
too.
to take part in this.
Yeah, it's good to hear a little bit about how you got into Flyer.
Yes.
Also, you're a little bit outside of the age bracket that I would expect to find someone who's dabbling in the newest electronics in trains. So I'm that's encouraging to hear. There's hope for all of us.
Right.
Yeah.
Lionel has all the new stuff with Flyer as well as their own product line.
Yeah.
And we call it Flionel.
And have you been happy with your Fly-N-L?
Very
stuff?
nice.
Yeah?
They do a nice job. Yeah. I got a diesel last year, and it's a tremendous runner. It's an ACE 70D or whatever it is. It's really nice. It's the Kansas City Southern. Very colorful.
Yes,
Yeah,
those
beautiful
are
engine.
beautiful. And does it have smoke?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And,
That's pretty
it
cool.
can be set up for the Legacy, but I don't have the power stuff yet for Legacy, so I'm just running it conventionally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Awesome. All right. Well, I guess we'll call this a wrap. Thank you both.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you,
Our
Austin.
pleasure.
Good
Thank
to
you,
see
Austin.
Ron, good input.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.